position. You can discuss this with the department tomorrow, but with our discussions with the department, it was an individual that was allocated more bigger pools, spent most of their time at compost, so now that position is being budgeted for in compost. So obviously the department will make some discussion on that when we talk tomorrow with the DPW department. So those are the highlights of the decreases in the expenditures area for the general fund. Bottom of page 3 is just a couple of notes on some other funds. Building department fund, which accounts for our inspections, permits, things like that. The revenues are expected to decrease by $113,000 or 5%, and the decrease is just less than anticipated revenue for rental inspections and rental registrations. And we can talk to the department on that when we talk to the building department. I think they're next week. So, and the last thing is to note, this is just a new fund for this year. And it's going to be a new fund for quite a while, but it's the opioid exempt fund. As you may know, the city, like a lot of local communities around the country, we are receiving some annual appropriations from the national settlement related to opioid lawsuits for some of the large companies, Walmart. There's a number of them, so we are getting our share, and that has to be accounted for in a separate fund. So we have established that fund because we begin to get some. Well, we begin to get some revenue this year.
Roughly $2 per resident.
It's not a whole lot. We did get a pretty good amount this year, about $120,000 because it was retro. We anticipate like $20,000, $30,000 a year. But again, something better than nothing.
Mr. Chairman, just to add real quick, we may have, there's another settlement going on. We got confused about this. This is for the makers of the products. Now there's another lawsuit currently going on with certain companies, like we may have discussed, that they're working on a settlement too. So there may be an additional round of or another lawsuit coming down regarding opioids. But there's a lot of restrictions on what we can use this money for.
All right, page 4 of the document. I'm trying to go through this a little faster because I've only got so much time. Talks about the 24 mayor's proposed budget. So the mayor's proposed budget right now calls for adding an additional $134,000 to fund balance. It is estimated that fund balance will be about $13.6 million at the end of fiscal year 24, which is roughly about 28.3% of total revenues. Again, I always caution, like I said, we have some, we still have some uncertain economic times, so we just want to make sure that we keep that mindful when we're looking at the budgets and make sure that we keep our fund balance at appropriate levels. Which the city has been doing a good job for the last, since I've been here, the city's been doing a good job keeping those levels up. So, the total general fund revenues is estimated to be about $48 million, which is an increase of about $554,000 or 1.2% from the 23 proposed budget. Keep in mind, $2.6 million of that increase is related to ARPA revenue. So you're going to see a $2.6 million ARPA revenue. You're also going to see $2.6 million in ARPA expenses. The total general fund expenditures are estimated to be $48,175,000, which is an increase of about 3.5%. And then also what the note says, keep in mind that $2.6 million of those expenditures are ARPA-related expenditures. And we'll go more into details when we move at the department level on those ARPA expenditures. Property taxes. The proposed tax rate is 25.7118 mils. That has actually a decrease of 0.0942 mils, and the decrease is related to Act 345 or the police and retirement millage. And that's really related because what we do in those villages is we estimate what the expenses are going to be for the retirement costs for police and fire, subtract out any other additional revenues we have to come up with the millage. And since the tax value is increasing so much, I think it was like 7% and some change, we can actually roll back that millage a little bit to offset some of that millage because we are keeping fund balance in that fund at appropriate levels as well too. Keep in mind that these millage rates do not include any heavily rollback. So it may be actually a little bit lower once we get those figures from the assessing department. They don't have them yet, but we will have them before the public hearing for sure. So I'll keep you guys updated on that. I've already anticipated that in the revenue section for taxes that we may have a rollback, so just keep that in mind. As I mentioned about taxable value, the total real and personal property taxable value for 2023 tax year is approximately 1.5 billion, which is an increase of approximately 107 million or 7.2% from the 2022 taxable value. Go through a couple more highlights on revenue on page 4 and 5. As I said, taxes are going up about 4.9%. State grant revenues are going up about 400,000, and decreased by 400,000. And decrease is really related to the one-time grant that we received this year from the state. They called it the enhancement grant. If you remember, we got that grant this year to help pay for the cost of ambulances. So we're not anticipating any enhancement grant next year, so that's why you see that decrease there. State sharing revenue is expected to decrease 381,000 or 4.2%. Those numbers come from the state. I use their estimates. They usually have revenue estimating conferences multiple times a year. And I believe the last one they had was in January, so I used their January estimates for next fiscal year. The total local contribution revenue is expected to decrease by $1 million. That is related to TCDC. If you recall, the TCDC does distribute money back to the city. It's related to the 96 voter levy. So every time the TCDC has surplus cash, they are required by a HUD use agreement to give that money back to the city to repay the city's investment in those properties through the levy. So this year, the amount that they distributed is $2.5 million, which is really a high amount. So it was a one-time high amount, but on an annual basis, we expect $1.5 million. So we're going back to that estimated annual amount of $1.5 million. So that's why you see a $1 million decrease there. Fines and forfeitures are expected to increase by $850,000 or 19.6%. Again, utilizing what the current trend has been, and then adding an additional amount for the return of the Waymaster, and the administration believes that that's an achievable number. Definitely lower than what we originally budgeted for this year, so we believe that's a very attainable number. That's it.
We have a Waymaster now?
Through the chair, we do not, but we're going to send someone to bring back our Waymaster.
And we can talk more detail with the police department because we'll be talking about it during their presentation as well too. And then other financing sources are expected to decrease $235,000. And other financing sources of uses is really kind of one-time revenues, and this one is actually related to the insurance proceeds for the church. Because we received all the proceeds this current year, we don't expect to see any proceeds next year, so that's why there's a decrease there. On the expenditure side, real quick, IT expenditures are expected to increase by $147,000 or 19%. There's an increase there related to a new position. And some additional contractual services, which we'll get more detail with the department they are presenting tonight. The HR department, our increases are expected about $57,000 or about 7.8%. $40,000 of the increase related to new administrative assistant position. Again, they're on the agenda tonight, so we can discuss that with the department head. The employee fringe benefit expenditures are expected to increase by $376,000. As noted before, that is really related to the estimated increase in the pension and retiree health care costs. General administration expenditures are expected to decrease by $228,000. Just like the one-time revenue, we did have some one-time expenses related to the church, so we don't anticipate those expenses occurring in fiscal year 24. Police department expenditures are expected to increase by $420,000 or 3.7%. There's an increase of $1.3 million related to wages and benefits. When we get to the department, we can talk about it, but some of the larger departments like police and fire, if you remember, it seems like it's a large increase, but when you look at what was originally budgeted for this current year, it's not, because we did a budget amendment in January, I believe, that really lowered their wages because of their staffing. They couldn't get the staffing up, so we'll go over those more in detail with the departments when we talk to them. But just keep that in mind when you see those kind of large increases in the public safety regular salaries. Fire department, same thing. There's actually looking at a decrease of about $1 million. There's a decrease of 1.4 million related to one-time capital expenditures that incurred this year. That's all ambulances from state enhancement grant and other vehicles that were purchased this year that are not expected to happen in next year. And then the 1.4 million is offset by about 113,000 increase in repairs and maintenance for fire vehicles and equipment, which the fire chief can talk about today when he comes up. DPW expenditures are expected to decrease by 623,000, and as I mentioned before, that's really because the current year we have that vehicle purchase, so we don't have those vehicle purchase next year, so that's why you see a decrease. Senior center expenditures are expected to increase by 66,000 or 24%, really related to SMART grant. A lot of the senior center and travel is refunded by the SMART grant, so you're going to see an increase here because they're allocating more expenses